Watch what happens when one person knows something and another person needs to know it. No manual in between, no documentation, just one human being trusting another. This is how your hotel actually runs.
Somewhere in your operation right now, there is a binder. Well, maybe it's a binder. Maybe it's a shared drive or a folder that you've called standards or a beautiful onboarding deck that someone spent 2 weeks creating. And here's the part nobody says out loud at the leadership meeting. That new front desk hire has never opened it. Not a single time. They learned the job by watching whoever happened to be standing next to them on their second shift. So you built the documentation, you're proud of it, and you should be because it's genuinely good work. But walk the floor on any given Tuesday night, and you will see the housekeeping team running the room turn the way the senior housekeeper taught them to do it, not the way the manual lays it out. Now, make no mistake, the manual is correct, but in the day-to-day operation, it is irrelevant to how the work actually gets done. And the strange thing is, the operation still feels organized from where you're standing. Let me say the uncomfortable thing early, because that is what these conversations are for. Documentation that nobody uses isn't an operational system. It's a very organized illusion of one. And once you see that, you start noticing something about who the documentation was really built for. See, we tell ourselves we wrote it for the team, but think about how it actually felt to finish it. When you typed that final period and printed out those beautiful pages and put them inside the binder and then placed it on the shelf, something inside you relaxed. The operation finally felt handled, and that feeling was real. The problem, though, is that the feeling belonged to you, not to the person who has to use the thing at 7 p.m. on a Friday night with a line at the desk and a guest who has lost their reservation. That is the pattern hidden underneath almost every shelf of unused documentation. The act of creating it relieves the anxiety of the person who created it. It does almost nothing for the anxiety of the person who is expected to follow it. Because their shift does not get any simpler, their decisions don't get any clearer, nothing about the actual work changes. So they do the rational thing and they quietly navigate around the official process and keep the operation moving on memory and shortcuts the same way they're doing right now. Now, watch how this plays out on a real floor. A server asks how to handle a comped meal. Now, the manual has a whole section on how to handle that. 3 paragraphs, in fact, very thorough. But the new server does not go to the manual because, well, the manual is in the office and the table is in the dining room and the guest is waiting right now. So they ask the closest experienced person who says, well, just void it and tell me after. Now, that is not what the manual says, but this is faster. It works. And right now, it's the real process. A week later, that same server asked a different shift lead the same question. And they gave him a different answer because this particular lead actually does follow parts of the manual. Now, the server is not confused about how to handle comped meals. He's got 2 different ways to do it. But they are confused about which human to ask. So they start keeping a private mental map. Ask Marcus when things are slow. Don't ask Dana that one. She's going to get weird about it. Check with the closer before you void anything. None of that is written anywhere, yet all of it is the actual operating system. You can watch the same thing play out at the front desk. The system says every late checkout goes through the manager. But in practice, the overnight agent has a rule of thumb. Anything before noon, let's just approve it, because waking the manager at 2 a.m. over a checkout, well, that's not a real option. That rule, friends, You guessed it, it's nowhere in the documentation. But it is the actual policy, and it works right up until the night it does not. And here is the person I really want you to see: the newly promoted supervisor, the one you just gave the floor to. They're running their own informal version of the process because the official one is too slow to use mid-shift. They're not being defiant, they're being effective. They are quietly holding two systems in their head at once: the one in the binder and the one that actually works, and translating between them all night so that the rest of the team does not have to. Now, run that forward a year and watch what it costs you. Every new hire learns the unwritten version, which means the unwritten version is the one that scales, not the one you documented. Quality drifts because the shortcut that worked for Marcus gets passed to someone else who has less judgment and who doesn't really know which corners are safe to cut. You can't onboard at any real speed because the thing people actually need to learn lives inside 3 or 4 specific employees and not in anything that you can hand to the new employee. And the moment one of those employees leaves, by the way, a piece of your operation walks out with them. And this is usually at the worst possible time, in the middle of a busy stretch where the person who knew the real process is suddenly gone, and the binder explains everything except the part you actually need. Meanwhile, you're tired. The same problems keep surfacing, so it feels like you have a people problem. It feels like nobody's reading and nobody's following through and nobody respects the system that you took the time to build. But that exhaustion is not coming from a lazy team. It's coming from running an operation where the official system and the working system are two different things. And somebody is silently absorbing the gap between them every single shift. So here's the reframe. And it's a small shift that changes almost everything about how you build from here. The measure of documentation should never be how much of it exists. It's always about whether the people on the floor actually use it under pressure. Volume is never the goal. Usability is the whole point. It is easy to confuse these, though, because you can see volume, but you can't really see usability. And here is the deeper thing underneath all of that. When you finished the manual, you felt something change. You felt the operation get handled, and you trusted that feeling. You treated the relief as proof that the work was done. But that relief was never evidence that the operation changed. It was only evidence that your anxiety changed. You felt aligned, so you assumed everyone else was aligned. And that is the quiet trap. Effort got mistaken for alignment. The binder was real, the hours were real, but the thing you were actually measuring was your own peace of mind and not their daily experiences. And those two things can move in opposite directions without you ever noticing. So mature operators, they start measuring a different thing. They stop asking how complete is the documentation, and they start asking a quieter, more honest question. Is anyone actually using it? They stop watching the shelf and they start watching the floor, because the gap between what is written and what actually happens is not a paperwork problem. The gap is an operations problem. That gap is where your real system lives, the unwritten system, the one that nobody has approved. Now, here is what you can actually do with this starting today. Do not start by blaming the team. Start by watching what they reach for in the moment that they have to make a quick decision. Whatever they reach for, that's the truth. Whatever they actually use under pressure, that is your real operating system. And whatever they skip, it's telling you that it was built for the shelf and not the shift. Then run a simple test. Take your most important process and ask yourself whether a brand new hire could use that document in the middle of a rush without asking another human for help. And if the honest answer is no, then that means the document is not finished, no matter how thorough it is, no matter how proud of it you are. Now, do not write the next version alone. Build it with the person who actually has to use it at 7 p.m. on a Friday night, because the document only works if it lowers their anxiety, not yours. If it does not make their next shift simpler, they will simply route around it exactly like they're doing right now. And one more thing, start paying attention to your strongest people, the ones who never seem to need the manual, because they are not proof that your system works. They are very often the reason you can't see that it does not work, because they're quietly covering the distance between what is written and what actually has to happen. And the day they leave, you find out just how much of your operation was living inside them instead of inside the system. Now, none of this means the work you put into your documentation was wasted. What it means is that the finish line is in a different place than what you thought. Because a document is not finished just because it is written. It's finished when the floor uses it without thinking about it. When the answer to a hard question is the same, whether you ask Marcus or Dana or the new hire who's only been on the job for 3 days. That is what a mature operation actually feels like. Not a thick binder, but a thinner gap between what is written down and what really happens. The goal was never to prove the operation was organized. The goal was to make the next shift a little easier for the person living it. So the work does not depend on who happened to be standing next to you when you learned it. So this week, don't go and add more pages to your documentation, but go watch what your team reaches for when things get busy. That will tell you more about your operation than anything sitting on the shelf, because the documentation was never the system. The people using it are the system. And the real work of a leader is closing the distance between the two. Because every time you close that distance, the work gets a little clearer, a little calmer, and a little more human for the people living inside it. And that is the part nobody ever puts in the manual. It was never about building a thicker binder. It was about building a better place to work. So remember, my friends, better systems do indeed build better workplaces.